I look for properties free and clear, and I teach the students to do the same. About a third of the properties in the United States, depending on where you are, ballpark, are free and clear. Why? Two things. One, they don't need the money, presumably. That's, the debt free, they would have pulled it out. So they'll give us the term. And two, we're 99% of the time structuring principal only monthly payments.
Chris, welcome to the show today.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate being here.
Give us a little background. I mean, your platform really is coaching people how to buy on terms. And what does that mean?
Yeah, terms to us means just creative real estate, just so everybody can relate to a term that probably makes sense. And then to niche it down for us, that means three things. Owner financing, the way we buy, subject to existing financing where the loan stays in the seller's name, and lease purchase, those three methods. That was born, just so with a little background, that was born out of the crash of 08, right? I came out of that going, okay, I got no cash, I got no credit, what the heck am I going to do? So that was by necessity, and then it grew into what we're doing now all over the country.
That's very interesting. How did you, just speaking of background, how did you actually get started in real estate? Like what was going on in your life? And yeah, what?
Well, okay, so I won't go back and bore everybody with 33 and a quarter years, but in 91 is when I started. I started by, I heard, you guys may remember the name Earl Nightingale, right? From way back when, personal development. I heard him talk about a gentleman from the Depression, actually, who would go and put signs in people's yard with permission to pre-sell their land. I'm like, that's a cool idea. So I started a business building homes whereby I would tie up the land, put no money down, get a builder to give me a package, and then I'd sell off that package. And all the subcontractors and the landowner would get paid at the end when the house was built.
Love it.
So I was in my 20s to ask for that. In hindsight, was pretty ballsy, but it worked. And we ran that business, probably built 100-something homes. That was my foray into real estate.
Hey, that's pretty cool. That reminds me of the Robert Allen book, like I have no money down for the 2000s, like one of my first real estate books I ever read. And it was fascinating. Just I get like reading Rich Dad, Poor Dad, being able to buy something without having to raise your own money, raising money, or even getting a loan on it. Like it's wild. Just the idea that someone would finance a piece of real estate. So you're saying buying on terms is everything like seller financing, subject to. Let's break those strategies down a little bit. Let's talk about each one of them. Just to give us an overview, and then we'll get into some more details here.
Let's start with owner financing, just because it's probably been around the longest, like before banking, right? So obviously. I niche it down. Let me say one thing for context. I look for properties free and clear, and I teach the students to do the same. About a third of the properties in the United States, depending on where you are, ballpark, are free and clear. Why? Two things. One, they don't need the money. Presumably, that's, the debt free, they would have pulled it out. So they'll give us the term. And two, we're 99% of the time structuring principal only monthly payments. That's been done on singles, multis, every asset class. That's a really cool kind of recession hedge, if you will, because you're getting hammered down principal every month, no matter what the market's doing. So that's my niche in owner financing. So if anyone's new listening, I'm sure they know it, but it just means the seller is stepping in as the bank. I'm not bringing new funds to the table. Yep. And very rarely are we bringing any big amount to the table. If we're bringing no money, we're probably going to be paying the seller's transfer tax or something like that, or legal, something, so they're not coming out of pocket. But very few times do we bring any money to the table in those deals.
All right, let's talk about that while we're on the topic. And there's a few other strategies in there. I think you're right. It's probably the most well-known and maybe popular strategy as well. It's a great way to get into real estate without having to have your own money. A little similar to raising capital, it's just in a different way. But it's, again, a way to, how do I buy a bunch of real estate without needing the money myself? So I love this. Now, how do you, what you're saying makes a lot of sense. You're looking for properties that are paid off, right? Because they probably don't need a bunch of cash, no leverage. And so there's no loan has to be repaid back. So you don't have to infuse it with more money. But how do you find these properties that are paid off?
Yeah. So you can buy, you guys know this, you can buy lists of like anything these days. So data wise, if you're not in Canada, Canada's tough, but United States, you can. And so we buy free and clear lists. We buy free and clear out-of-state owners. That's a cool list. Those are our two main ones. And just in our regular prospecting, the way we teach it, they're going to be calling on for sale by owner, for rent by owner, and expired listings. They're going to run into free and clear properties. But if they want to seek out more, they can just buy the list in any county.
Okay, so you can buy these lists, and they list properties that are free and clear. Wild that's out there, Yeah. So that's pretty cool. And then how do you contact them? You're using the normal wholesaling flipper kind of methods. You're sending them postcards. You're cold calling. Like how do you getting a hold of the seller?
Yeah, we have a trained team of VAs. They're not controlled by us, they're third party, but we've trained them to make that initial call. So the student, or we call associates, aren't making that first call. So the VA calls, they have a script they go through, they're pretty well trained. And if and when someone raises their hand and say, yeah, have someone contact me, then that student who has that VA doing that call will make that call and go through their own scripts and bring it to the further stage of an appointment, probably.
They're appointment setters. Basically, they're pre-qualifying. Hey, would you be interested in selling your property?
Yeah.
Yeah, a little bit. I open to a conversation, and so now you're connecting them with the student or the buyer in that area.
Yeah, because you mentioned wholesale and flippers or something earlier. This is an important distinction. So when we call and they go, oh no, I don't want to deal with investors. You guys, you're trying to steal the property. The wall and the defense comes right down. You can literally feel it on the phone when we go, no, 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 we'll pay your price as long as we get blah, 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 our term, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So, and that usually works. Even my own office building, I just recently sold it off, but this gentleman was selling, he had a 4x8 plywood sign on a busy road saying, owner financing, and realtors were coming in with offers. He didn't want that for estate and planning and tax reasons. He wanted owner financing. So I gave him his price and we structured a great deal. So that's a great example of you just you're helping someone accomplish a goal or solving a problem. That's how you're doing these. Because everybody goes, how do you convince them? You don't. You just see if there's something you can help them with. And that was the case there.
Do you guys have like a best case scenario going into these deals? And then, uh, I understand the whole sub two thing and the seller financing, but when is a situation when you maybe wouldn't offer them the high price in exchange for just terms?
More so on the sub two then, Garrett, if I'm tracking with you, meaning if someone comes to me on a sub two deal, typically if they're willing to do that, they're probably either in arrears or know they got something coming up where they're gonna have a financial headache, right? So they're more prone to go, whatever I owe on it. Like if we had a divorce one where they're like $4,000 in arrears. Okay, that's easy, right? Small enough, but they want it out. So we just bought it for what it was worth. We probably picked up like 75 grand instantly, but we solved their problem still. So we didn't quote unquote lowball, right? In the case of owner financing, they typically want their price because again, they're free and clear, right? They're just looking for the best. I don't know if it's ego or what it is, but when they get their price, they're like, okay, I'll do 20 years or 10 years or whatever. It's pretty cool.
You said I do love seller financing for that reason, because hey, look, you can get your price. I need terms, or you can give me my price and you don't get any terms. So I like that. But you said you're solving problems for people. And back in my house flipping days, I felt the same way. I really did, right? There's people that needed to get out there, short sale or foreclosure or something like that. But in the case of seller financing, why do they agree to sell it on seller financing? Why would anybody do that?
Yep, a couple of reasons. I'll think of just recent deals. So the building was 100%, as I alluded to, about estate planning for his wife and son. I think he knew he was sick. He passed away during this process. And secondly was for taxes. I remember him calling me and said he forgot to put a prepay in. He was like forbidding me to refinance it anyway because he didn't want the cash. He didn't want to cash out. He structured a 20-year deal. So that was purely tax reasons. And I guess in hindsight, I found out from my attorney, everything he and his wife ever sold was owner financing for that reason. They wanted the cash flow. Other ones, a student of mine recently did a deal that was combination sub two and owner financing. And it wasn't like they were stressed, unlike most sub twos. This guy had like 3 homes, 200 or 300 grand equity and a loan, and would take no payments or interest on the equity. And we did a sub two deal. The student did. So that was more, he wanted relief from that $3,000 or $4,000 payment that he had. He had 3 houses, right? So that everybody has a different scenario. You just got to find that kind of that hole, if you will, to plug.
Okay, so the two things I heard is people like that there's no taxable event, right? And
Well, there is, but it's kicked, it's spread out.
it's spread out. Okay, all right, and then they like the cash flow from the actual being the bank of that. Are these people typically like older people, like they're retired or about to retire, or is it really across the board?
Across the board, just thinking of examples, I think is the best way to answer any questions here. We bought some multis from a gentleman whose dad died, had built the multis, and he did own the financing. He actually lived in the building. We said, Chris, I go back and forth to Canada. I just don't want to deal with it, but I'll be your eyes when I'm in town. So that was more, he inherited it, didn't want to deal with it, and wanted a cash flow stream for, I think it was like 4 years. All different scenarios.
Yeah, interesting. You bring up multis. Let's talk about that since we care about multis.
Yeah.
And maybe other asset classes as well. To what degree does this work or is applicable to other asset classes, commercial, multi, whatever?
Two of the three methods, in my opinion, you can do them all, but two out of the three work great for any asset class, and that would be the sub two and the owner financing. How we bought those multis is we bought a list of 4 to 10 units, small, and it was a small list. It was like 280 pieces. We
Yeah.
mailed, bought one, went, well, that was easy. Let's do it again. And we mailed another one, and bought another one. So we were just looking to add to our portfolio versus exiting on rent owns like we do in the residential, right? So we literally bought a list of how many units we wanted and free and clear.
Right. Okay. So you bought the same list, and small multis, in my experience, are typically owner operated, similar like single family houses.
Yeah.
I have not seen this work reliably on larger multis. So I don't know, 25, 50 plus, because they're owned by, LLCs and there's gatekeepers and things of that nature. We teach it in our platform as well as a tool that you should have in your toolkit. But other than Brandon Turner, who wrote about it in his book, oh, and one other guy, one of our students actually used creative financing to get a deal done. But why does it maybe not work as well on some of these larger ones?
I think to your point, it might be access. Like we got offered, I forget which student brought this to the table to us, but it was like a 38 unit complex and he was offering sub two, like he put it out there publicly.
Uh,
He was retiring. So I think it's access to the right info. Like you can do a search, for example, of tired landlords, believe it or not, or distressed landlords. Now there's a new source with X amount of units. So I would be talking to them versus just haphazardly going online to stuff on the market. Most of our stuff is off market because you can creatively pull that list. I would suggest definitely that your community does that and start to get very picky with how they look at that. How many units do I want? And do I search tax delinquent or behind on taxes? Do I search tired landlords? I like those lists for multis.
what are some of those lists? Because some of the larger multis, where can people find that?
Oh, where they find it? You can go old style. I still do it manually, but not electronically through melissadata.com. They're a good source, but there's a lot of list sources. We use a white labeled land voice now. They come out with some really cool things. Most recently, we brought them into our community, but there's a lot of ways to pull that now.
And
To search
you're
that.
still doing the same thing where you're looking for paid off properties. And you're just looking for a certain asset class, certain size, location.
You can go out and look for either free and clear, yes, or like I said on the if you're specifically looking for sub twos, go search for tax delinquent with a loan or tax delinquent with little equity. This is how detailed you can get with the search, or all three: tired landlord, tax delinquent, little equity on a multi. Boom, that's a good conversation to have. You could even do out of state owners because a lot of the multis are out of state owners, right? And they might be retiring or will someday. That's why I love those lists. Over time, as you guys know, things change with these landlords. Life happens, or they're getting older, whatever. These are good lists.
Chris, so there's a lot of like list sources and all these different ways to find these lists, but for someone that's listening and maybe wants to start doing some of this, and it's kind of overwhelming as far as just all the data that you can pull in. And I'm curious, like, what kind of infrastructure are you putting in place behind these lists? I heard the VAs, but what else are you doing to kind of really monetize these things?
Yeah. So I'll do the flow, right? See if it answers you, Garrett. So VA, you grab the list, VA calls the list, VA surfaces sort of the cream, tells you to call it. That gets input into our REI Black Book, which we've also white labeled and have all private workflows in there. And you're done. Everything else is automated. So if you can plug into a system, ours, yours, anyone's, right? Then you can keep this stuff automated so you're not overwhelmed. Lead comes in from the list, gets called by the VA, gets put into your CRM. And then that's automated with the follow-up and the drip.
Yeah, gotcha. So you need a list source and you have someone to kind of pre-qualify them a little bit, and then you start calling them. And obviously that's the students, they got to do some kind of work. They're calling on them and they're using scripts and having conversations, and now they're negotiating deals. Cool. So let's talk a little bit about subject too, because we kind of mentioned it, glossed over a little bit. Can you talk a little bit more what that strategy entails? You talked about this is for properties that have a loan on it. Typically, it's delinquent. Describe that a little bit more, and then describe the actual strategy.
Yeah, delinquent, or the owner, like the one who was wealthy and had 3 or 4 homes, just wanted to have some financial relief, right? They wasn't delinquent at all, just wanted some closure on that. So the conversation's very similar. When we talk to these people, we're seeing why they're selling, how soon, and what if that doesn't happen. When you ask why you're selling, how soon, and what if that doesn't happen, then you get the why. Well, if it doesn't happen, I'll keep the property. Okay, not motivated. If it doesn't happen, I got to dump the price or I got to do something. Okay, then we need to talk in 90 days or whatever that date is. So, and then how it looks is we do a regular closing. I don't care what type of asset it is. When it's sub two, we do a regular closing. And if the listeners are used to real estate closings, instead of new money coming to the table on the settlement statement, it just says subject to existing loan with a balance of blank. And they take over that loan on the spot. You don't, for the sake of newer people, you don't assume it. A lot of people think, oh yeah, that's assumable. Assume it means you're applying for it. It's staying in the guarantor's name, the seller's name, and you are buying the property with that loan in place. That's a big difference. So you're never personally on a loan.
That's right. Now, what are the risks to this, right? I'm just thinking back in the old days, subject to is that you're buying a property, the previous owner stays on the loan, you're not really assuming it. So
Right.
what are the risks of doing that? And how likely, of course, is that risk? I mean, risk is, nuclear
Yep.
war, I suppose, but what's
The obvious answer is the due on sale clause, right? It's in most loans. There's a proper way to paper this, and by no means am I an attorney, so just disclosure for everybody. But there's a proper way to paper it into a trust, and the Garment-St. Germain Act back in whatever, 1982, allows transfer of property to not trigger the due on sale when it's properly papered like this. And I'll leave the rest to the attorneys. So the answer really is you need to make sure, this is so important. I've had so many deals get squished by attorneys. Even when our attorney, who knows how to do sub two and does thousands of them, calls the other attorney and explains it, sometimes it still gets squished. So you need an attorney who does sub two deals, not one that says, well, yeah, I can figure that out. No, you need one that does it. And we have them in our community, obviously, but that's so important or you're going to be spinning wheels.
This is on the seller side. You want to have an attorney that advises the seller on these things, not the
No,
buyer.
you want your own, the buyer investor wants an attorney who knows how to operate in a title company that does sub two purchase. This is a papering, a very specific task for papering. So you do it right. You don't have a risk. The seller doesn't have a risk.
It's similar, honestly, kind of with 1031 exchanges. Like you have to have a QI that's familiar with syndication 1031s. Same, and also the same with an attorney that's familiar with, just all the SEC related items that come with it as well.
Yeah, 100% similar. Yeah.
Yeah.
You
Like, if you're not, you really like just, and this is a more of a high level topic, but like in our fields respectively, it doesn't really matter whether it's your attorney or your CPA. They have to have that kind of knowledge and experience, or you can get a much different experience in general in a negative way, right? If they don't know what they're doing in that. So I'm curious, Chris, like, how does one find that? Because it's not like they're always advertising themselves out there, especially CPAs, but like sub two attorneys or seller financing specialty attorneys.
Two answers come to mind, Garrett. One is the local RIAs usually have attorneys in there. Doesn't mean they all know creative, but you'll find them that way. And then communities like yours and ours, right? Ask around in the community. So for example, over the last, I've been at this 33 plus years, but the community's been in place for 11, going on 12. So all you got to do is go, hey, who's in this particular state? We've probably got, I don't know, 20, 30 states covered now, over time. You just accumulate them. So link up with the community and or a RIA. Yeah.
Now you mentioned subject to there's a due on sale clause. Let's talk a little bit about that. What that is. What is the likelihood of that being called out, and then how does one deal with it?
Yep. A couple things are interesting, even in light of a recent legal thing with our attorney. So the due on sale means if and when the property is transferred, the note is due on sale. With the exception, again, of that act that came out in the early 80s that allowed people to move it in trust for family and estate planning reasons, it doesn't trigger it. So that's what I meant by it has to be papered properly. Now, this particular attorney is in Florida. This is a recent case. He came to our community and taught it. It was challenged. A bank tried to call a note. Now, I've never in my 33 and a quarter years had one call because we make the payment. Just make the payment. The bank doesn't want your house. Or the building. They want the payment. But he was challenged on it. His client was. And he won. And he won because it was papered properly in a trust with the seller still in that trust as a way to do it so that they're still protected. He won the case. So it's just scream loudly that if you have someone that knows what they're doing, if that had been a regular real estate attorney, nothing against them, but I don't see how they would have won that because it wouldn't have been papered properly against the bank.
So step number one is obviously avoid the situation by papering it properly in a trust. So that's pretty cool.
Pay your bill.
And you got to pay, of course, pay your bill. But let's say you don't, okay? Because That's pretty cool. But let's say there's an attorney who says, well, I do subject twos all the time, but we're not doing it in the trust, so they don't do it in the trust. And then all of a sudden, the bank challenges it now, and they actually call the note undue. How does one, is that catastrophic? What does one do in that case?
I don't think it's catastrophic. Again, opinion, not legal. Because can I then, depending on how it's papered, can I then literally deed the house back to the seller? Can I sell it off? There's all kinds of things we can do, right? So I don't ever think it's catastrophic. Creative real estate in and of itself, when you have curveballs, you can usually pivot if you've done your planning right and have some time to do so. I wouldn't be intimidated by it, neither would an attorney who knows what they're doing, right? They could delay the foreclosure and sell off the properties, all kinds of things.
Chris, are there any specific instances or types of situations that you see often where buying on terms are maybe the most effective? So like kind of a common, or is it always kind of different?
This is good. I wouldn't be able to say, hey, vanilla, here's the best way. I would just say that when there's a problem, because, okay, let me say this, let me go backwards. If someone's selling, this is the easiest way to say it, and they need the cash because they have to go buy a family house with their kids and they need to be in a school district and they need the cash to do that, we're not the buyer. So that's when it doesn't work, right? Every other scenario works if they don't, quote unquote, need that money now, as long as we can solve their issue. So it's really the opposite. I can answer better when it doesn't work, right? And I tell the sellers that. So if I got your price, are you open to a lease purchase or owner financing whereby you'd wait for your equity, but it'd be protected? No, I couldn't do that. I got to go buy next month with my kids. I'll just dump the price and do that. Okay, I'm not your buyer. So everything else we can work with over time.
Now, you mentioned a third strategy. Was there a third strategy that we need to talk about besides?
Yeah, lease purchase. Lease purchase is simple for a new person because I can tie up a property. Our agreements are built with a $10 deposit. Literally, it's a lease purchase. We encumber the property so they can't sell it off to their Uncle Joe during the transaction. But all we do is we control that property now. We operate the same way. We exit it the same way, but we control it and we don't pass title. So there's less risk for the seller. Frankly, for a new student, they feel like it's an easier deal and less risk because it's a $10 deposit versus having to pay transfer tax for something. So that tends to be a first method for a lot of new students.
All right, so explain this a little bit
Yeah.
more. So lease purchase meaning that you have some kind of purchase agreement, but you don't actually transfer title. So can you expound on that a little bit more?
Yeah, let's say, Michael, you have a house. Let's just use round numbers. You have a house that's worth 500 grand. And we agree it's worth about 500. You had it on the market, it wasn't selling for whatever reason. Could be functionality, could be price, but it didn't sell. You owe 300. I look at that and I say, okay, we can structure a lease purchase whereby I'm entering into a lease with you with the option to purchase it on or before a certain date. And that lease says what? The lease says, I'm going to make the mortgage payment. I'm going to take care of any repairs and maintenance, and I'm going to protect your 200 grand equity. So on or before 36 months, using that as a term, I'm going to pay off the underlying loan, which is now less, and I'm going to give you 200 grand. And all that is just controlled with a simple lease agreement with the option to purchase. That's it.
And why would a person do that? Because obviously in 3 years, presumably the way that you would build equity, which is yours, guys, you only have to pay up to 200, and now hopefully maybe it's worth even more, maybe $50,000 more, which is yours, which is why that strategy is so cool. But why would a homeowner defer that equity or
Yeah.
and not want it now? Why not just sell it now?
I'll think of some real life stories. The general answer before I do that is they have a situation where they can't sell it conventionally for whatever reason. The market's not giving them what they want. So let me give you some examples. I'm in Rhode Island, but in Connecticut, there's a lot of military. And so we've bought several homes from military people that had to get relocated and they didn't want to keep it for a rental. And so they just go, whatever, as long as it's covered, right? That type of scenario. I had a woman, I'm thinking of recent deals, who was going to Washington, D.C. Her credit was great, everything was fine, but she couldn't sell it for what it's worth without coming out of pocket. So there's those scenarios. Like, I don't want to pay out of pocket for a commission, so I'll do this lease purchase and I'll at least protect my loan and not have to come out of pocket. So scenarios like that. The market wasn't giving them what they want for whatever reason.
Is it also possible that maybe they want more than the market than the market is willing to pay? Similar to what you're saying, right? So if there's a house days on market, 60 days, 90 days, right? It's not selling. You see this all the time. Then they take it off the market. Then they try to sell. They want too much. They want too much for whatever reason. Okay, maybe it's a loan or some personal situation, but they can't sell the daggone house.
Yep.
Is that kind of house a good target for a strategy like this?
Yeah, I had two. This is interesting. I had two that started like in 2013 or 14 that literally just finished because at the time they owed a little bit more than it was worth on the market, and they didn't want to transfer deeds. So I did 9-year lease purchase options with them, and they literally both of them recently cashed out. They just again wanted closure to move somewhere else. I remember one specifically wanted to move to a different school district. So I took on their property with a 9-year lease purchase option. They wouldn't transfer title. Okay, we did it. We did the same like end result, but we couldn't get ownership.
Now you have this option to purchase, which means you can exercise that option at any time before then, right?
Yeah, yeah. The reason I put out 9 years is they owed more than it was worth, so I needed the time
I see.
for
Okay.
the principal to come down.
I see. Yeah. So you were controlling the property. Interesting. Yeah.
And those are both, I think one was like a 70-ish grand, all three of our paydays, and then one was over 100 grand. So they work well when we get the time we want with that massive principal pay down. And presumably over 9 years, you're getting, I don't care what the market does, in a 9-year span, you're usually okay.
Yeah, it's going as long as you can pay the mortgage, right? There's got to be enough cash flow
Yeah.
for that, and then ideally something left over at the end of the day. But I see your point. Even if there's only a little bit, you're just now building equity. It's not costing you anything.
No, and we pass. Remember I said on the lease purchase, we tell the seller, hey, we're taking on all your maintenance and repairs, but we pass that on to our buyers, our tenant buyers looking to get loans and need time. That's all.
Yeah, so this is interesting. So you don't just rent it out, although you can, but actually what you're doing is are you selling it on a lease purchase as well, or seller financing or something like that on the back end?
Usually lease purchase, rent own,
Rent own.
unless we have a sub-2 deal where there's no clock ticking for us to cash it out. If they prove themselves over 2 years as a wannabe buyer, we do change that to a owner financing. And yes, we have kept some and rented them too. So you can play with your portfolio. I call it wealth stacking because people go to me on a lot of shows like this. They'll say, well, why do you get rid of your properties in 2, 3, 4 years? Say, I don't. I look at the portfolio and say, all right, I can make this one a long term. I'll finance them. I want to cash out of this. I'll let it cash out. So you can play with that and kind of wealth stack as you build.
Yeah, I love that because these sellers are cooperative and they're considering creative ideas. So yeah, I really like that. Garrett.
Yeah, if you're wealth stacking your portfolio and you're scaling it considerably, how are you guys doing management? Like, what does that look like? Are you self-managing these? How do you recommend that people do that?
Multis, we got a management company. The singles, we just do in-house. Like going into COVID, I think we were up to like 74 singles, and we just do it with one office manager here because if they behave the way they're supposed to, and I'll give you the default rate, if they behave the way they're supposed to, Garrett, they're handling maintenance like they're a buyer. They're not calling you. You're not a landlord. Again, if they behave like they're supposed to, like a true buyer, if you did the qualifications right. My son has set up, Nick, some cool systems to do that. Now, default rate, 2 to 10% for us, which is really good in the rent-own space. You guys probably know, like most people publicly on show like this, they'll tell you, well, I get like 20% of them to the finish line. That's awful. Like morally and ethically, that's awful. So we set it up for them to win. And life happens. So you get a 2 to 10% default rate.
What are some of the biggest mistakes that you see people make when they're trying to do stuff on terms?
The buyer's side, because we did it. Okay, you get excited like in 13 or 14 when I came out of the crash, like, I got to put these buyers in these homes. They weren't the right buyers. They were renter wannabe buyers. They weren't true buyer. Hey, I'm leaving corporate America. I make 6 figures. I'm just not financeable yet. I need seasoning. Those are great buyers. So we've learned that over the years, and we took some hits because of that. And as a result, the students don't have to take as many hits. But it's making the wrong decisions with putting not qualified buyers in your homes. That can hurt.
So that's a lease purchase. What about the other 2 strategies? What are some of the errors? I mean, I'm obviously subject to not using the right attorney. I think we talked about that. Not putting it in trust as well. Any other mistakes in general when your people are trying to buy on terms?
Just getting too overly anxious, especially in your first 1, 2, 3, 4 deals. Like I got this deal, and they don't pay attention to necessarily the terms. Or I've literally had students, despite us giving them all our checklists, like literally, here's what we do. Here's your checklist. Oh no, I didn't do that. Oh no, I forgot to file that notice of option to protect me. Oh no, like just follow the system. So it's rushing.
Yeah, it's rushing. Absolutely. This has been just fascinating, Chris, shining a light on creative financing. I love that. Where can people find out more about you and what you guys do?
Yeah, they can. I'll give you Tribe a free book, and this is not one of those offers where you go, oh, free book, and then you got to pay shipping. It's truly free. We're going to ship it from here. Go to wickedsmartbooks.com/Michael and the numeric number 3. So we know it came from this group. And of course, any social media, just Smart Real Estate Coach, they'll find us.
That's awesome. Well, it's been great. Thanks so much for being on the show today.
You bet. Thanks, guys. Good chatting.